Hello? Okay. Sorry for the people on streaming. I was just going over last week, so you didn't miss anything. So today we're going to study a new character, which is Hagar, who was the slave of Abraham and Sarah. And, every time I hear her story, especially like one scene, I realize like it's actually my favorite verse and part of the Bible. It really is. It's really powerful. Her story is very thought provoking, and so I have a lot of questions for us to discuss together. Um, but we're going to talk about her story, her situation, and what was her turning point. Because we said, like, Hannah's turning point was when she took her situation and brought it to the Lord, and that changed her whole perspective. So today we're going to talk about Hagar, which is what does that mean in Arabic? Because in my Hagar, right? Like a, which is what? Immigrant or like someone who runs away? Okay, yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah. So it means immigrant. So like someone who is like leaves their place and which she actually we're going to see in her story she actually did. She left her place and she kind of fled. So she's in a couple chapters in the Bible. I mean, she doesn't have a ton about her, but in the few chapters, it's super powerful that we see her situation and how God interacted with her. So we're just going to start with Genesis 16, 1 through 6. So if somebody can read that like really loud and clear, and those who are streaming can join us, 16, 1 to 6. Try to read it. Hold on, you have to use just because they're streaming so they can't hear.
Now Sarah, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarah said to Abram, "See now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go in to my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her." And Abram heeded the voice of Sarah. Then Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. So he went in to Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. Then Sarah said to Abram, "My wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judge the Lord judge between you and me." So Abram said to Sarah, "Indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as you please." And when Sarah dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence.
Okay, so this is probably familiar to many of us, but we'll just, review it. So basically, you remember when Abraham and Sarah, when they had gone to Egypt, and they said that when they saw Sarah and the Pharaoh saw that she was beautiful, and then Abraham said, "Oh no, she's actually my sister," because he was afraid. And then Pharaoh was about to marry her, you remember? And so, and then when he found out, and then, bad things started happening to him. And when he realized that Abraham had lied, that it was actually his wife, he was saying, like, "Oh my gosh, like, please, like, get away from here. I don't want to have any judgment upon myself." And so he sent Abraham and Sarah away, and they say that that's when they gave them Hagar, and they gave him a lot of things to basically make up for what Pharaoh had was about to do with Sarah. And then they said that from that moment Hagar became their slave. Like she was kind of like their like they paid them to like leave with all these different things, including slaves. Um, so so she became Sarah's maidservant. So she wasn't just like a servant, like they probably had many servants. Like to be someone's maidservant means that you were kind of like someone that they trusted, someone that they felt really close to, someone that they liked. Like a maidservant wouldn't have been chosen if it was someone who was just like that they didn't think highly of. So it showed that they actually thought highly of Hagar, Abraham and Sarah. They chose her. Um, And, and then as we know, so this was what it's important to know that this was after the Lord had promised Sarah that she was going to have a baby, right? So we're not going to do a study on Sarah, although we could. And we all know that Sarah, instead of waiting on God, she said, I'm not going to wait any longer. Actually, I'm not going to wait any longer. So she thought the best solution was to have Abraham sleep with Hagar and have a baby with her, which, it sounds like, to us, it sounds so horrible, but at the time it was very common. If women couldn't conceive, they would choose one of their maidservants, and she would be like um, a surrogate mother. I mean, yeah, surrogate to hold their baby. But for a godly woman like Sarah, who knew God and who had experienced God, it wasn't something that, it wasn't right for her. It wasn't a great choice for her. So I was thinking, the same thing for us. Um, there's so many things in our lives, I feel, that we kind of justify because it's very culturally accepted and everyone does it. And, because, like, again, when we see this story, we think it's crazy, but it was so normal. Like, she could even tell her friends about it. Like, imagine if we did that today. Like, oh, I can't have a baby, so I'm just sending, like, whatever. But, people knew about it. It was not a big deal. So what do you feel like for us, you know, what are some things that is acceptable to the culture that we have also accepted, and we're like, yeah, it's not a big deal. Can you guys think of anything? Mm. Oh yeah. Okay. So Christine said people, living together before marriage. Yeah. And it's almost so common that if you don't, it's like, yeah. hmm Like people, even within like some Christian communities, it's normal. So yeah, that's a good example. I actually thought of one that I was convicted of myself is just like not having like a Sabbath, even though it's one of the Ten Commandments, and it is like something that God asks of us, like having one day of like rest, making Sundays like the holy day. And like, I look around and I'm like, well, we live in Northern Virginia and people have, my kids have sports games and we're like all over the place. And I always feel convicted because my justification is like, well, everybody else does it, everyone else is doing it. So that was something I thought.
Just as Sarah was, she felt like she had to do it because she wanted a son, and this was the social norm. Like today, like same thing, the Sabbath. I think about this all the time, but our culture gives us Saturday, Sundays off, for example. So sometimes, say, ourselves, people who work, or just our husbands, they're only off Saturday, Sunday. So you try and cram everything you can do on those 2 days. So Sunday most things close early. So you try and cram in what you can when you can. So sometimes, say after church, because of course that's not something you're going to skip over, and then you're like, okay, I have X, Y, and Z to do afterwards because I didn't get to do it the day before, and then Monday the schedule starts all over again. So just as that is our norm today, that would have been her norm then, is to get her maidservant and give her to her husband. And it's something that, like you said, I sometimes say, okay, well, I couldn't get what I needed to do yesterday, and my husband's only off Saturday, Sunday, and I need to do it on this day. So then we don't end up taking, say, the Sabbath and taking a day of rest. So it's something I myself that I struggle with as well all the time. And it is not, like you said, it's the Ten Commandments. It's not supposed to be our social norm, but we've adopted it as our own.
What does it mean to us? Like, what do you guys think it means nowadays? Because I'm a little confused on how to even go about it. Because even if you're at home, like, let's say you're a mother to two young kids, like, I'm doing laundry, I'm constantly cleaning, pals of laundry are always there. Yeah.
Busying ourselves with like what the world busies themselves like with, you know what I mean? Like not having that like reverence for Sunday. Like I grew up in Michigan, and I mean, I remember on Sundays, even like, which I'm shocked now because I'm like, that's so strange. But grocery stores, maybe, I don't know if it was like that here, were closed on Sunday, which was so crazy now to think about. Like, there's nothing closed on Sunday. Chick-fil-A. Go Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A. Yeah. So, I mean, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yep. So Anam said to, you know, reduce the other things that require you to go out of your house. I agree. I agree. Because then you come home exhausted. Um, anything else that you guys can think of? Oh. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Okay. Okay. Um, okay. So, but like I said, but Sarah was a godly woman, and she, you know, she knew what it meant to wait on God. God had worked in her life before. So this was kind of her just being like, okay, you know, I need a child. This is how I'm going to do it. But Sarah is her own, you know, is her own study. Um, so as far as Hagar, then, when she was asked by Abraham, she had no choice. I mean, she originally was a slave by, it was not her choice. They just took her probably from her family. They took her away from her family. She had to, so, and she had no choice. Whatever she was told to do by Abraham and Sarah, she had no choice. She had no rights. She had no dignity. Um, she had, you know, no independence at all. And so when she was told to do this for Abraham and Sarah, it wasn't like she had a choice. Yeah, it was, again, it was just like, you're going to do this, you know. Um, so so basically you could look at her life and you could say that she's in all these circumstances, and there's really nothing that she did to, you know, it's not like she deserved it, and there was nothing she could do to control it. She was in a situation completely beyond her control. And we know as women that's like our biggest struggle. If we have a situation in our lives that we don't have control of, it's like super hard. So but that was her life. That was what she was used to. Um, so many of us are in similar positions. We're not actually like slaves, but we're in different circumstances that are beyond our control, that we can't control, where there's no one there to defend us, no one sees us, we struggle alone, we have circumstances that are not able to be solved by anything that we could do or that others can do. So we're kind of like Hagar, we're just kind of in this situation and there's nothing that we could do about it. You know, some of, like I just wrote down some examples. One could be a difficult marriage. One could be difficulty with some of our children, you know, like that nobody sees. You know, some people can just not see the struggles that we have with our own family. Illness. People struggle with anxiety, depression, other mental illnesses that really can be debilitating, and those are oftentimes people suffer and struggle alone, and they're in situations that are out of their control. So now we're going to look at Hagar's response to her situation, okay? But before we do that, I want to ask, when we find ourselves in these situations, that we are, you know, we're in these situations, they're difficult, there's nothing we can do about it, what is our reaction? Like, what do you think is your, you know, first reaction? What are your feelings? What are your actions? What are your thoughts? If people are comfortable enough to share that. So when you're in these situations, yes, Nancy.
So for me, my biggest reaction normally is, because as women you want to control things, is fear. And I've been having a lot of personal feelings because I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. So I'm on the realization they will no longer be in my roof in a couple of years. And they're asking me very hard questions. I was in the car driving, and my oldest goes to me, "Would you hire somebody from the LGBTQ plus community?" I was like, "Nah." I was like, "What?" And, you know, I had to explain because I have a small business. I'm like, "You don't discriminate. We love everybody. مش عارف إيه." And then I took the biblical stance as a parent and explained, you know, that lifestyle and stuff like that. And then my other kid last week came and said, I have a friend who's trans and she's 11. And I was put in a very weird situation because the girl wanted to come over. I've met the girl. She has no friends, so I have a soft spot. So there's the part of me that's like, I want to protect and shield them from sin or how people live certain ways. And at the same time, I want to use wisdom so that my children don't ever grow up feeling like, well, I'm holier than thou, or that's like, judgmental. So I always pray to God. I was like, I am not articulate. I'm not eloquent. I'm not as, like, John can give them all the biblical knowledge. So I give him the hard stuff. And for me, I just pray about it. Like, I talk to God. I'm like, where I'm deficit, which is a lot of areas, please fulfill. And, like, I get surprised when people come and they're like, oh, your kids are good kids. I was like, oh, that's not me. They're not me. And it's honestly really because the one thing I saw my mom do was pray. So that was just the only thing. Pray.
Yeah. Okay. Like this? Okay. So recently I was listening to this talk and I think it's like the Family Life Ministry group. And they were talking about something similar to what you just mentioned. And this lady who's now an adult who actually mentors couples, like Christian couples and all that, talked about how she grew up in a family where she didn't really know God. Like her parents were Christians, but they didn't know God. They didn't talk about him. So her home life was very abusive. The father was very abusive, so she didn't experience love at home. Her friend's parents should have not allowed her to come to their home because they were a very, like, close-knit family, like, very, church every Sunday, like, participated in every bake sale, like, things like that. So she was sharing that had the parents of her friend not allowed her to come into their home, she would not be who she is today. So she was like, sometimes God uses, like, the whole purpose, like, we tend to, as Christians, only be friends with other Christians, and we think that that's what we should do. But our biggest goal in life is to show love to everyone. Like, if we start discriminating on who to love, then we're doing the opposite of what we're called to do. So this girl did exactly what the great thing that you're doing with your kids. She was allowed to come into this family. They guided her, and she gave her life to Christ based off of the parents of her friends. And so I think nowadays that's what kids need the most. Like, if you look at this concept in general, I really feel it comes from a place of like not feeling like they belong and lost, because a lot of them, when they say the reason why they went this route is because they feel like they now belong to a community or people or a group that understands them. So if they see that love elsewhere, I think you're doing such an amazing job. I just wanted to share that because I recently heard that, and I really think it makes such a huge difference to people. And as a convert, I truly believe that if I didn't have my little Greek godmothers who taught me, like, the little bit that they did, that, I would not be who I am today. God uses us in great ways.
Thank you for sharing. So what Nancy was saying was that, when you were faced with these situations, that you just, go to prayer, which is great, because that's one of the options that we could do. Other times, sometimes we feel sorry for ourselves, like when you're in a situation that's outside of your control, that's like unfair and hard. A lot of times as women, we get bitter. We feel sorry for ourselves, which is actually at first actually what Hagar did, rightfully so. I mean, if you think about it, rightfully so. So we get bitter, we get upset, we feel sorry for ourselves, we start to be negative, we start to lose hope. Those are some of the other ways that we can react sometimes. If a situation's out of our control, even if we know it's out of our control, we try to control it, like Sarah did. We try to just make things happen and make things move because we cannot handle not being in control, to be in a hard situation that we can't control. So the worst feeling, though, for for Hagar was that she felt like nobody saw her. And I think that we as women can relate to that. You know, we do so much, we do so much, and we carry so much, and, you know, it's hard. And sometimes we feel like not that nobody appreciates us, we feel sometimes that nobody even sees us. So even if you're struggling, not with just the things that you carry, but because we're doing so much to always give, if we are going through our own struggle, a lot of times we just feel, you know, because we are just moving. We're not just sitting there like sulking. So people are not like, oh, are you okay? They don't even know. So we are holding whatever struggle we have inside of us, and we feel like, does anyone even see me? Does anyone see me? So basically what happened was, as we read, that when Hagar found out that she was pregnant, in verse 6. So he went into Hagar and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. Like, so that bitterness that she was holding in just came out. That just came out, and she took it out. So I'm sure that she was just kind of flaunting it in front of Sarah. I'm pregnant with your husband, you know what I'm saying? So she did not react in a very good way to that. She did not make a good choice, you know, but she had been struggling and suffering for a long time. So that was how she reacted. That's kind of what burst and came out of her. But what happened from that bad choice was a consequence. And the consequence was that Sarah basically told Abraham, like, you know, I'm really upset. And I think it's funny that Sarah blamed it on Abraham. Like, you know, like, what did she say? She said, my wrong be upon you. Like it was his fault. And he's like, I just did what you told me to do. And so she was really upset. So Abraham said, okay, you could do whatever you want. So she started treating her badly. It didn't say that they kicked her out. It just said that they treated her bad. Sarah treated her badly. And does it say abusive? Harshly. Yeah, so Sarah dealt harshly with her. Actually, it could have been physical abuse. Yeah. Well, yeah. So she made a bad choice. Yeah. So she did. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like talk to your husband. Hey, can you go ask Minnow? Okay. You want to sit next to me, but you just can't talk. Okay. Well, actually, yeah. That's what I was saying. She made a bad choice. Like she was in a situation that was awful, and she was suffering, and it was out of her control. And Nancy, when she's in those situations, she prays. Hagar, well, sometimes she prays. She would like to pray all the time, but Hagar did not. Like she just reacted she made a bad choice, and that bad choice led to this consequence of her, and so she couldn't handle the consequences so much. It got so hard for her that she ran away. It said she fled to the desert. Imagine that she felt like the desert was a better choice than she must have been treated very badly if she felt like going into the desert was a better choice than staying with Abraham and Sarah. So she went to the desert because she didn't deal with her situation. So this is interesting. So sometimes and I actually wanted to make a disclaimer because there are situations like you think of when Mary and Joseph, when Herod was going to kill baby Jesus, they literally fled to Egypt, and that was a good choice. So there are situations, if like, God forbid, if anyone's in an abusive marriage or something like that, like a physically abusive marriage, it's okay to flee, you know? So that's not what I'm talking about when I say stay in your hard situation, you know? But some of us, you know, we can have a lot of difficult situations, and the answer is not to run away. The answer actually is to stay in our situation. You know, but do you guys feel like you don't have to say the this actual situation. But are there times that you have been so desperate to get out of your difficult situation that you just flee? I mean, not like, run to the desert, but you're just like, I'm done. Whether it's like you quit your job, you leave a friendship, you're like, I'm so drained from service, I'm leaving, I'm quitting, that happens a lot. And sometimes it can be led by God. There's so many situations where we can think of that we're just like, I'm fleeing to the desert, I've had enough, right? So, so now let's see what happens next. So if someone can read Genesis 16, this is just the next part, 8 to 15. This is my favorite part, 16. Did I say six? Oh, yeah, so 8. We did not finish. Okay. So, okay, yep. So 7 to 15, Mimi. I like the Mimi voice.
Delilah. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarah. Sarah, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now with child, and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. It is still there, between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael.
Thank you. So what's the best line of that whole thing? The most touching line of that whole passage that we read? Yeah. Isn't that so touching? She says, then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees. For she said, have I also here seen him who sees me? Like, what a powerful moment. Especially because we said, not only was she in so much misery for years. Actually, I think, the next part is coming up. But I don't know how many years that she had been a slave. But it was quite a bit. I mean, Abraham was 86 at this point. So she has been suffering for years, and then she made a bad choice that she suffered consequences for. And God still, it's not that just he ran into her. He was searching for her, right? And I actually asked, the Abunas, I'm like, was this a type of Christ? Because, sometimes when the angels come, that they say it's like the pre-incarnate Christ. It's actually like Jesus pre-incarnate. But they said the fathers say that this angel actually was an angel, but he knew, God had sent him to greet her, and God had, he knew that this angel knew everything that had happened with her, and God sent the angel to look for her, to look for someone who literally, probably her family had forgotten about her. Abraham and Sarah didn't care about her. She literally had nothing to her name. She was a nobody. She had no dignity, nothing. But the fact that this is in the Bible, I just feel like that God wants us to see that I see you. I am the God who sees. And I think that's the most powerful encounter in the Bible. It's like the Samaritan woman, right? Jesus went out of his way to this woman who felt like she was just like the worst person. And nobody cared about her. Nobody liked her. And Jesus himself went out of his way, and he said, I see you. I see your suffering. I see you. And I think it's so powerful when for us to feel that way about God, and for us to do that, to be Christ in that way to others. I was remembering, when we have such a big church, and so unfortunately, like people, we don't know each other's names a lot, which is so, it's just, and I'm actually so bad with names. But when people that I don't think it's just because I'm like Abuna's wife, but when people know my name, and I don't think that they should know my name, and they're like, Sherry, you know, it just makes such a difference. I don't know, don't you guys feel that way when somebody actually like knows your name, remembers your name, asks about you, or those people who when they talk to you, they're like really listening, like they actually really care. This is how I felt like, you know, Christ, when he came to search for these people, he's like, I actually care about what you're going through. Maybe the people around you feel like nobody cares. Everyone else is busy, especially here. That's the thing. Everyone's busy. Nobody cares. But Jesus was saying, or, you know, God had sent this angel to tell Hagar, oh, I see you. I see your struggle. I understand. I feel for you. Like, I care about you. So I feel like that's part of, you know, when we fill up with the Lord, part of what should come out of us, one of the fruits is that love, that and love manifests itself through actually caring about the person in front of you. You know, caring. When you ask someone, how are you? Like, pray that God would actually give you the heart to really genuinely care, because I feel like that makes the biggest difference. You know, I feel like that's the greatest gift to give people. So why do you think that he asked? He asked who, he said, he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, which so he knew her name and who she was, you know. Hagar, Sarai's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? Why do you think he asked her if he already knows? And she actually responded, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarah. Why do you think that he asked if he already knew?
I think it's just because it helps justify the situation, and she declares it, so it's known not just to her and, you know, to the angel, but whoever's around as well.
So Heidi was saying to be very personal, right? To be personal. Did anyone have any other idea? I mean, there's not like one right answer. Any other ideas of why you think that he asked her? He asked her who she was, or where was she going, if he already knew. Exactly. Yeah. So she feels fully known. So she feels that, like I was saying, like that he actually cares. Like, tell me, like, what's going on? You know, what's going on? What are you running from?
And also as a slave or as a nobody, which that's who she thinks or feels like, nobody ever asked her. She was always told what to do. And the angel is about to tell her again what to do, but I think before he tells her, so it doesn't just come as an order, he listened to her. So I think that was also a turning moment it made a difference. I think if he came and ordered her to go back, oh, okay, I'm used to it. People order me all the time. But asking her and listening to her first, now she feels like I see the God who sees me. So now it's a relationship. It's not a one-way ordering.
Yeah. That's a beautiful point. Yeah. So in verse 9, so after she says that, the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress. So return to Sarah and submit yourself under your hand, which is a very difficult thing after she had, you know, he knows she's fleeing for being treated harshly. And then what does he do next? He says to her, you're pregnant with a child that is going to be called Ishmael, which, and then what? Right. And God listened to her. And what's significant, it sounds funny. It said he was described as, he shall be a wild man. A hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand shall be against him. Where was the part where he said he will be like maybe it was in your translation, Mimi. A wild donkey of a man. And if, you know, when we hear it, and, you know, I know that we know like Islam came from Ishmael, but why was that so significant to a no name slave who had no rights. She couldn't talk. She couldn't say her opinion. She could never. Why was that? Why was it significant that her son was going to be like that? Why was that actually for her kind of cool? Exactly. So her son was going to have all the power, all of the rights, and the life that she did not have. So he was giving her her answer, but through her son. That through her son, he's saying, "No, I heard your prayer. I heard the cries of your heart, and this is the way I'm going to answer." You know what I mean? So she had this great encounter. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I wrote here, he will not share in the fate of his mother. Um, so this was actually, so he told her, um, go return to your mistress. And the next thing he said, you're pregnant with Ishmael. And then she did actually return. She went to return. So the turning point, no pun intended, the turning point when she, is when she had this encounter with God. And she completely changed. She all of a sudden had this courage to go back. She all of a sudden had this new perspective. And why do you think that was? Why do you think that she just had all of a sudden, you remember Hannah's perspective changed when she just like went before God and she spent time with him, poured out her heart to him. So Hagar's situation was a little bit similar, but there was something that, I mean, we already talked about it. What was it that gave her this courage? Yep, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, like she never really had an encounter. Exactly. Exactly. She is known, she is seen, right? She's not alone. So she now did her situation change? No. I mean, she was pregnant before, she's pregnant after. Do you think, well, and we're going to see Sarah's going to treat her even worse 16 years later. Her situation didn't change, her environment didn't change. She still went back as a slave, but she had an encounter with God, and she felt like she was seen, and she felt like she was known, and she felt like she was understood. That maybe no one else around me knows what I'm going through. Nobody else knows deeply what I'm struggling with, but God does. And because of that one fact, all of a sudden I can walk with my head up. I can go back into my situation and be confident, be courageous. I can handle this. And that was her turning point. So the turning point was that she was seen by God. And I think that's like why it's so important for us to spend that time with God, so that, like, I mean, now because, Christ came and we have the Holy Spirit and we're able to have that encounter every day, we are always able to be seen and we're always able to pour our hearts. The problem is sometimes we don't do it, not even to God, and we're like, ugh, nobody sees me, nobody cares. But God is like, I'm just waiting for you to come. I'm just waiting for you to pour out your heart to me. So
And I just realized this, that Hagar would have lived with Abraham and Sarah seeing their faith in God, right? So she would have come from a pagan background. She would have been in this environment where it's completely, the one God and the God of this and God, their faith. But it never became personal for her, right? So she was in that environment, like sometimes we're in the environment, we're surrounded by faith, but it doesn't ever become real unless we have that personal encounter and touch Christ himself. And then everything changes.
totally. I mean, that encounter, I think it's so powerful. Like, she was so despondent and hopeless, and that one encounter was just literally life changing. Yeah. 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 May God like open our eyes to see that, because sometimes I feel like we're just like not opening our eyes to see that. So, for the sake of time, I'm gonna just quickly go through the last part. So she went back, and then 16 years later, when so in the meantime, the next couple chapters, Sarah and Abraham end up having Isaac. So Isaac and Ishmael grow up as brothers, but then Sarah, when they were teenagers, got really jealous of Ishmael. So she told Abraham again, and it was hard for Abraham this time because it's his son. So she was saying, like, I don't, just for the sake of, I mean, if you guys want to read it home, I'll send it on the WhatsApp group. If you guys are not in the WhatsApp group, let me know. I'll add you. It's Genesis 21, 8 to 21. So he basically was, she was jealous. She said something about him. I don't know what exactly bothered her. It's Genesis 21, 8 to 21. Oh, it said, yeah, when Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. Oh, because basically, like, it seemed like Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to, scoffing, like he was like not being nice to Isaac, apparently. Therefore she said to Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac. So they kicked her out again to the desert. This time she was kicked out, the first time she left. So this time she was kicked out, and she was sent out. Abraham gave them like water and a little bit of food, and then once it ran out, she was afraid that Ishmael was going to die, and he was 16. So it wasn't like I always imagined for some reason that he was a little kid. He was 16. So it must have been a really long time that he didn't have water. And so she actually said, let me not see the death of the boy. So she sat opposite of him and lifted her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad. So he was crying too. Then the angel of God called to Hagar. This is the second appearance of an angel to Hagar. 16 years later, what ails you, Hagar? Hagar, again, he calls her by her name. Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation. When God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and when she went and filled the skin with water and gave the lad a drink. So God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. So they stayed in the wilderness, but God provided for them. He dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. There was a part, maybe I was like reading in a different. Does your translation, Mimi, say what they named the well? Because it said the well became known as Beer Lahai Roy, or the well of the living one who sees me, because what happened was that he opened Sarah's eyes. Oh, that was the original well. Okay. Or in the first passage. Right. So that was the well was named the well of the living one, the one who sees me. So anyway, so once again, Hagar was seen by the Lord in her very difficult situation. And just closing points. So Hagar, when she left the first time, sometimes God wants us to stay in our situation because the reason he wanted her to return was because he wanted to bless her through her trial. He wanted her to grow close to him through her trial, and he did not want her to just leave and escape. And the second, take home is that her situation did not change, but once she had that encounter with the Lord, when she had that encounter with Christ, and she felt like she was seen and she was heard, which we can all have access to that. Like, we just have to give it a try that we really like. Okay, no one else cares. Well, God cares. And I'm going to pour out my heart to him. I'm actually going to physically get down on my knees or sit down or stand or do whatever I'm going to do and tell him, my complaints, how I feel, and give him some space to reveal himself to us like he did to Hagar. And that was what changed her life. That was why she's like this great woman of worth. And he revealed himself to her 2 times in such a powerful way. And that shows us that no matter how far she made a lot of bad choices, no matter how alone we feel or miserable, despondent, that God sees us. He sees us. Like, I think that's so powerful. The God who sees us. Even when you're, praying today or tomorrow, you could say, like, dear Lord, the God who sees me, and just like stop and think about that. And that, I feel like it can make you like tear up, the God who sees me. So we will close. Any questions, comments? I had a few verses to like kind of meditate on. I'll send them in the group chat. Okay, what?
Why? So God obviously knows us. He knows our hearts. He knows our weaknesses. He waited to reveal himself through the angel until she left and like made the bad decision. But it's not like she wasn't obedient before that. Like, she was listening. She had no choice. She was always complying to what others were asking her to do. So she was submitting for a very long time. And yeah, she may have made a wrong decision, but she was treated wrongfully. And so, I guess that was her only moment of control that she had. And I think of that as like, as a mother, one, hormones take over, and then other than that, like your protective nature of your child. So she had this like entitled moment where that caused her to be in like issues. But why wait till she gets to the desert, and then why put her through that again a second time to reveal yourself? Like, that's always my question. I'm like, why, God? Why do you have to wait till I'm like at my absolute breaking point before you show yourself?
I actually am just going to repeat something I heard. It's very similar in nature, the question. So the answer, I'm just going to, repeat. It's not, so it's like when we pray for something, it's in our human nature to want it instantly. But our time's not God's time. So everything happens on his time at the perfect time. So sometimes, he knows everything that's going to happen, but he also gives us free will. That's what we're born with. So he gives us all the opportunities, all the life choices, all the options ahead of us to take the right, say you're at a fork at a road, to go either left or right. So he gives us the opportunity to do that. And then even so, like she goes that far, she has to labor to get that far, but she was obedient when she listened and he told her to go back. And she did, and she saw what came of that. So it's like, it's a give and take. It's like a language that's going back and forth. So when you pray for something, if you don't get it immediately, you get angry and you want it now, right? But if you meditate on it and you're patient, you also have to show God that you really want it. So through prayer, he's either glorified or not. So it's either that you show that you are dedicated or that you are not. So it's the same concept also. It's just with the free will, whether, he gives you the time to make that choice and the decisions, all the free time. If he just shows up in the middle of it, it's not like you labored or troubled or went through it or anything at all. And also, not just that, but also back then you have to remember, it's so all this can be recorded for us to learn from as examples. So I think that's also the very generic, easy, short way to put it. But that's just something I heard and repeated.
His goals are not our goals. Like, his thoughts are not our thoughts. So my thought is, I want to fix the problem. Because let's say if it's related to kids or something, like you were saying. So I want to fix the problem, and I want to fix it now, because I think I don't want to get them, I don't want them in any more trouble. I don't want to, another problem. I don't, but his thoughts are different than our thoughts. He wants them to grow from that experience. Like the helicopter mom. I want to fix it. I want to fix it. I want to fix it now. I want to run. Oh, you forgot your lunchbox. You did this. Okay, we keep doing stuff on their behalf, but they're never having a chance to know God for themselves. Like, we know God for them. Does that make sense? And I'm just using the example of kids, but it's not necessarily that. So sometimes God is always willing to talk, willing to communicate, but his goal is different than our goal. And that's why sometimes it takes time until the two meet together, because he could have been speaking, but she's not listening. She's not ready to listen. Even though she's a slave, but she might have had a comfortable life. Because as Sherry said, she was their maid servant, means she was the closest one. She might have been treated a bit better than the other servants. So, but she was not ready to listen. Like, why do I need God? Who is this God? Like, yeah. So he's always willing to talk and willing to speak, and he's probably speaking, but am I willing to listen? And our goals at the same time, like, is it the right time?
Abraham and Sarah.
I always imagine like Jesus with, knocking at the door. And sometimes we're not ready to hear that. And that's exactly what Manel was saying. I want to just focus on that. Sometimes we have to go through a process to really take it in, right? And when we finally like arrive at that point, that's when we see and he's revealed to us.
Yeah, and I think I just think his goal is like our sanctification, and he knows when that point is, and it's often a lot longer of a time than we think. I get it. Like I've learned the lesson, or whatever. If I have increased in this virtue, and he's like, no, sorry. So I just, like Manel was saying, his thoughts are like he's looking at our sanctification, and I think it's just like when I look at the hardest times of my life, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I grew a lot. And if it would have come quicker, I don't think I would have, because, I don't know why it's like that, but it is. So anyway, yeah. Or just, yeah. And we just cling to him. And the more time we spend with him, the more time we are like him. And sadly, for me, if I don't have things that I'm constantly coming to him for, I'm just like, as more lax in my spiritual life, unfortunately. I don't know why human nature is like that. So, yeah. So, anyway, so we will stand up and pray just because I want to respect everyone's time. You want to pray, Eva?
In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Lord, we thank you for this time that you brought us here. We thank you for bringing each one of us here. You gave us each one a specific message that you wanted us to hear today, and for those here and those streaming as well. And we thank you, Lord, for Sherry and Manel for their efforts in this Bible study series and learning more about the amazing women that each character in the Bible, Lord, we can take so much from, and just even one verse that we can learn from. Help us, Lord, to each have that personal relationship with you, the personal touch that you gave to Hagar, and the overwhelming feeling that she had of your love, and that you saw her, you understood her, you cared for her, and that she was an individual and she was a real person to you, and how that changed her life, and change us also, Lord, and help us bless this church and all the service in this church, all our families, and get us all home safely. And hear us through the prayers and intercessions of St. Mary, St. Mark, and all your saints. Hear us, Lord, when we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
For those of you who are able, can you please help Manel? I have to run and pick up Joshua, but I don't want her to be stuck cleaning everything. But it will take like a second. Just put everything away. Sorry. I'm sorry. I have to run to pick up Joshua, yeah. Yep. Yeah, the chairs. Sure. Ava, what do you say? Yeah, so women's
You
support.
want me to text you to remember?
Remind
or
me
you
if I don't do it by tonight, text me please. Because if I don't do it tonight, I'll forget. But yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sal. I'm so glad you came. I'm glad it worked out. Yay for soccer practice getting canceled. Sorry, guys. All right, Ava, we have to run.
Okay, run.
All right, I'm gonna just grab this.
I'm not in the WhatsApp group.
Oh, okay. Can you don't send? Does Mimi have your phone number?
Mimi, yes.
Okay, tell her to send me your phone number, and I'll add you to the WhatsApp group.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Ava, let's go. Oops.
No,
Is it
you
on?
didn't say anything, but
Oops.
I thought you turned it off before you.
Oh, just press it really hard. Yeah. Press the other
Press it and
side.
hold